Welcome to DSM's Black Art Matters series. We're here today with Quan Powers, who is a Dallas ISD dance educator. Welcome, Quan.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Of course, thanks for being here. So we're going to jump right into the conversation here, and the first question we ask each of our guests is, what does Black identity mean to and for you?
Oh, okay.
A little bit of a loaded question.
Yeah, it's definitely a loaded question. But first, I think that being Black for me means resilience, innovation, creativity in the face of a struggle. Mm-hmm. It means to be everything that our ancestors want us to be and more. And for me, being Black, I see it through different lenses. Mm-hmm. As a male educator, mm-hmm. as a father, mm-hmm. and a Black gay man. Like, it's three different lenses for me. So life and how it shapes me being Black is different in each moment.
Yeah. I love that you bring up how it's shaped by the struggle. Does the struggle also shape the identity? Does it go both ways?
Yes. For me, it does.
Can you expand on that just a bit for us?
So I think for me, it all started, my mom was a single mom. Mm-hmm. She had me when she was 18. She got pregnant at 17, mm-hmm. graduated, had a baby at 18, mm-hmm. all in the same year.
Wow.
And there have been points in my life where my mom has worked multiple jobs and I wasn't able to do the things that I wanted to do or go to the places I wanted to go. Mm-hmm. And I think that seeing how much she struggled let me know that that's not what I wanted to do.
Right.
So I've worked my behind off to make sure that the life that I had when I was younger is not the life I have that I'm older, and it's not the life that I'm giving to my child.
Mm-hmm. And you also grew up in the small town of Nacogdoches here in the great state of Texas. Can you talk about what that experience was like, being a young Black man in a small city that can sometimes feel backward thinking?
Oh, absolutely. Well, my dad was in the Army, and so we lived in Germany from when I was like 3 until 9. Mm-hmm. And so when we moved back to the States, I was a little Black kid that pretty much spoke no English. Mm-hmm. Because at home we spoke very little English. I went to school at a German school, so it's all German. So you walk into class the first day, and you're the odd man out.
Right.
You're a Black kid, but you don't speak English.
Uh-huh.
So all the other Black kids in the classroom think, hey, yeah, we got another one in the classroom. But as soon as they start talking to you, it's like, no. And at some points in my life, I felt like I wasn't Black enough to hang out with the Black kids. Mm. And so it made it very, very difficult to grow up in that town, right. Which is why I gravitated to a different set of friends. Mm-hmm. And so growing up, being in high school, like you said, the town is really small. So all the kids I went to elementary school with, I went to high school with. Mm-hmm. And friends that I had in high school or elementary school, when we went to high school, they were like a completely different groups.
Right.
And you can see the segregation in different places in the school. Mm-hmm. I think growing up in that town definitely shaped who I am today because it allowed me to be able to expand and view life differently. Right. I'm able to see it as not only a Black man, but as a man, mm-hmm. just as a person. it wasn't until I got to college when I actually started to see, hey, wait a minute, this is different.
Right.
Like college experiences, parties, clubs, all this stuff was different. And that's when I started to think, wait, what's going on? Why have I never known about this?
Right.
One of the things I tell everybody, and they think this is hilarious, but I didn't know about HBCUs until college.
Wow.
Like you said, I grew up in a small town. My counselor was a white lady that didn't really know about HBCUs, so she didn't tell me about them. And one of the conversations that I had with my husband the other night was, I feel like if I'd gone to an HBCU, my college experience and my view on life would be completely different than it is now.
Wow. In what way do you think it would be different?
I wasn't really immersed into the Black culture, so I didn't understand it.
Right.
And so I think that being able to see that firsthand and experience it firsthand would make me understand it a lot better than I do now. My goal now is that even though I didn't know that, I want to make sure that I give my daughter that experience, that she understands who she is, why it matters, and why it's such a big deal to have those experiences as a Black woman.
So do you think the evolution of your Black identity, really that process began in earnest after you left Nacogdoches?
Absolutely.
And what was that? What is that like for you? And where are you now in that journey?
I moved from Nacogdoches to Austin. And
Big
lived
jump.
Big jump. Huge jump. I lived there for 4 years, and I was still kind of in the same bubble. And hang out with the same group of friends. So a lot of my friends were white, Hispanic, not a lot of Black people, because I didn't really know a lot about it except for my family.
Right.
It wasn't until I moved to Dallas like 11 years ago that I actually got to see firsthand what it was like to have a Black community. And I think that where I'm in my journey now is like I understand it more. My goal right now in education and in life is to make sure that there's advocacy and equity in education for Black and brown kids. I want to make sure that boys that look like me see people that look like them in the classroom, because I think a lot of the times that's the disconnect. There's not a lot of Black male educators.
Right.
And so if our kids don't see it, why should it be important to them? Why is that a big deal? So we have to be the change for them to understand, okay, education's a huge deal. This is what you can do. Even though somebody else is telling you that you can't, you most definitely can.
Right. Do you find that with your students at Spruce that you are oftentimes the first Black educator that they encounter? Or being within Dallas ISD, do you think they're more exposed to Black educators in the district?
It depends on where you go. Since our school is predominantly Hispanic, there are a lot of Black teachers in our school. But I think as in Dallas ISD dance, there are only 2 Black male dance educators that I know. And in the whole district, there is probably 7 male teachers altogether. Because it's a very female-driven industry. And so I think that when kids see you walk into a room, a man, a Black man, they automatically assume, oh, wait a minute, we're about to do a whole bunch of hip-hop. And they don't expect to get an education that's going to cover all genres of dance.
Right. Do you find that there is, at any point, a disconnect in your classroom between how you interact and connect with your male students in your classroom versus how you can interact with your female students in your classroom?
Absolutely. I think for me that I push our male students more, especially when I see potential. And I say that because they don't get that push.
Right.
The girls that I have are pretty self-sufficient. I make sure that I say, hey, you're doing a good job. That's great. And they're good to go. But with the males, I found like sometimes it's a struggle.
Yeah.
Especially bringing a boy into a dance class where he may be the only one in a room full of girls.
Right.
That alone is going to make you self-conscious. So I have to make sure that I encourage that gentleman that we have in the classroom, make sure that they understand that just because, your friends are making fun of you or your dad's talking about you, if this is what you want to do, then do it.
Yeah.
because you've got one life to live and it's not for anybody else.
And how do you connect with those male students who are facing those stereotypes that you yourself may have faced growing up in the dance world as well, when they're at such a vulnerable age? What is that experience like for you as an educator?
I think as an educator, you and as a person, you can always tell when something's wrong. And generally, when my boys start to drift off or act out, or it's just like having a kid of your own.
Right.
You know that if your kid starts to act out, something's missing. So you got to address it. So my main thing that I do is that I sit down and I talk to them and figure out what's going on. And I make sure that they have a point to where if they need to contact me via email or, whatever they need to do, they can get in contact with me just in case. Because even as an adult, I still get, call names at school. It's happened before.
Wow.
An instance happened a couple months ago. So for all of our classrooms, there's a board outside, and you just make it your own. And one of our policies is that if the kid walks out the door, you don't get back in. You've walked out the building. And so a kid was trying to get back in. I was like, no, not happening today. Go around the front. So he gets back in the building, figures out where my room is. He tears down all my pictures, and then he writes fag on my corkboard.
So what came after that? How did you yourself emotionally handle that, along with also having students around you who likely experienced and saw that as well?
Yeah.
That's a lot to handle at one time.
Yeah.
What was that? What was going on in your mind? What were you processing? What was that experience for you?
One of the things that I had to do first was not show any reaction in the hallway around anyone. I didn't want anybody to see how I was going to react to it. And I immediately called Rachel after I was done. I was like, hey, this has happened. No big deal. It's okay. And she's like, no, it's not okay. And at that moment, I started to cry. And I had no idea why I was crying.
Wow.
Because I've heard, it's been said plenty of times. I've been called, gay, sissy, faggot, plenty of times. And I think that it was this moment that it was a kid that didn't know me, who thought that he had the right to come and destroy something that I created.
Yeah.
And to call me a name that he knew nothing about, that he didn't know where it came from. And so talked to my administrator, they took care of it, they found the kid, and they made him replace everything that was on the board. They made him apologize. But to me, it almost seems like, okay, we're going to put this Band-Aid on it and make him apologize, and then just move on with the day.
Right.
And that's not fair.
Yeah. There was no learning experience there.
No.
It sounded like for the student of, this is why this is not okay.
Exactly. So I feel like that at that point, there should have been a meeting between me and the student and the parent. And we should have figured out why he did this, why he thought that was okay, and what we're going to do to correct it.
Right.
Like just saying fix the board and move on is not correcting it.
Yeah. There's some cultural intelligence learning there that needs to happen with that student and those parents, I'm sure.
Exactly.
This is a great segue into a conversation I want to have with you about the intersection of identities.
Yeah.
Because you have multiple identities that are intersecting, right? You mentioned earlier there's a language identity there when you came back over from Germany. There's you being black and being a black gay man and what that is, and being a dancer on top of all of that. Can you talk to us a bit about how all of those intersecting identities work together, or how they sometimes work against each other?
Absolutely. I think the one identity that's really big for me right now is being a dad. Anything that I do is with the forefront of how is this going to affect my daughter, and what is it going to do to her. And so I think that having that one be the big one right now, it kind of, if I get opportunities to perform or choreograph, it's like, is this going to take me away from being at home with my kid?
Right.
So I have to kind of think about what I'm doing. All those personalities work against each other all the time. It's always a struggle.
Yeah.
To figure out how you can be a choreographer, a dancer, a teacher, and a parent all in one. But when they work together, it's beautiful.
Right.
Because all of these experiences allow me to be able to create things for my students and for myself that I feel like describe my black identity.
Yeah. And how do all of those identities influence the art that you make both personally and in your classroom with your students?
For me personally, all of the things that I create come from something that's happened to me. All the stories that I create, all of my dances have a story. And that's what my kids love about it, is every time we get ready to start a new piece, I'll sit them down, I'll make them listen to a piece of music, and then I'll explain to him what my story behind it is. Prime example, Coldplay, Fix You. So one of my favorite songs, I've always wanted to choreograph to it because it reminds me of my grandmother. So when my grandmother passed away and I got my car to drive back to Dallas, that's the very first song I heard. And so that kind of reminds me of that.
Yeah.
And so I remember like a year ago, I tried to choreograph to it and I couldn't do it. Because to me, there's so much hurt that's connected to it.
Yeah.
And my kids saw it. I walked out of the room and start crying. And I generally do not cry. Like, I'm not a crier. But for them, they're like, man, what's going on?
Right.
And I think that in that moment, I kind of had to step away from that piece. But with my students creating, I try to take from their experiences. So we sit around before we start anything at the beginning of the year, and I ask my kids, okay, what's something that's happened to you, good or bad, this year, this summer, that you think is important right now, that I should know? They don't have to write their name on a piece of paper. They just write it on a piece of paper and put it in. No names, anonymous. And what I do is I'll go through that box and I'll read them. And I'll say, okay, let's pick our top three. We'll pick our top three negative ones. We'll pick our top three positive ones. And what we try to do is that when we're doing our pieces, we try to incorporate all six of those together and figure out how to make all those things happen in one dance.
Wow. It's a beautiful story that is told then, I'm sure, through that work and exercise. I want to touch on this idea of trauma. You mentioned you having to step back from that song because it reminded you of your grandmother, but also just the trauma we get from our ancestors being passed down, right? Just as Black individuals. How does that trauma affect you and your artistic work, or does it?
It does. But I have to start with how the trauma has like aligned in our family. My grandma had 5 girls, and she raised them really, really well. But my aunt, who was my mom's younger sister, she had a baby at 13.
Wow.
My mom had a baby at 18. I had an aunt who had a baby at 15. I had a cousin who had a baby at 15. And I think that it just became a pattern for how it worked. And with my mom, before she married my stepdad, she dated multiple dudes that, not at the same time, but, within her span of life. And I think that she picked like a couple of dudes that were the same. It was always the same man. And I remember one instance, we were at a party, and my mom was like, okay, it's time to go. And I think she had made somebody mad at the party. And we were walking through this trail in the woods, in the dark. And there were like 4 people that jumped out. And they jumped my mom and beat her up.
Oh, my goodness.
And I remember running to the store and hiding under the counter with the store clerk. And I remember my mom walking into the store with like blood from her head because she'd gotten beat up. And for her, it wasn't about taking care of her at that point. It was about taking care of me. But I think that throughout when that happened, it just became a pattern that if somebody beat her on her, it was okay.
Wow.
And it wasn't. It wasn't. And I think that for me is like the biggest underlying trauma that I have is that I moved my mom here last summer to get her into a place where she understands that you don't have to do the things that you used to do. It's okay to do better. And so it's okay to want better. And it's okay to like not have those experiences that traumatize you for life.
Right.
Like I refuse as a father, as a man, to ever have my daughter experience that. And I think seeing my mom's trauma and raising a woman make me think about how her future is going to be. Right. and that if any man ever touches her, we're going to have problems.
And how do you approach that topic with your daughter from these lived experiences that you have, to get those points across and to say she can do better and she does not have to go through what you yourself have lived through?
Yeah. Well, she's 5 now, so we don't have to have that conversation yet. But when we get to that conversation, I just want to be completely honest about the experiences that I've had and anything that's happening to her, and have an open and honest conversation with her. But I've got multiple daughters.
Yeah.
I'm a very drill team, so I get, girls who saying, my boyfriend's being mean to me, or, he cheated on me, or whatever it may be. And you have to get to a point to where you make them understand that they can do better. And I know that's super cliche, but they can. And they don't know that because it may be something that they're used to seeing all the time. It may be a pattern for them. So they don't understand how that works. But you have to be positive. You have to make sure that they are able to speak their truth.
Yeah.
One thing I find crazy is that sometimes when people are listening to people with problems is that they're not listening to them. They're offering them advice. There are points where we don't need your advice.
Right.
We just want you to listen. Like when I'm angry sometimes, I just want to vent. That's all I want to do. I don't need you to tell me, oh, it's going to be okay. No, just don't.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes that they need that. So when it gets to that point to where my daughter is at a point where, something may have happened that shouldn't have happened, I want her to be honest with me about it and not be afraid to talk to me about it.
Do you find, especially as a Black father, that, what you've lived through with your own family, what you've seen in your classrooms with your own students, that you are more guarded towards your daughter now, or do you try to stay as open as possible?
Absolutely. I'm definitely guarded. I'm the helicopter parent. I am. I'll admit it. I am. My daughter goes to my mom's every other weekend, and I call my mom like 5 times a day. What is she doing? Can I FaceTime her? What's going on? I'm definitely that parent because of the experiences that I've seen and what I've heard with my kids. I think that all those things that happen make me want to protect her, especially now, like with all the things going on with Black Lives Matter.
Right.
Like she's a Black woman. And one of the things that I want to teach her is that it's okay to be angry and it's okay to get angry. But you also have to know there's a place and a time to be angry. Because if she's angry anywhere else and she sees anyone else, she'll automatically be labeled as an angry Black woman when she's not. And who knows what could happen.
Yeah.
Like there's so many Black women that have been killed that nobody knows about.
Right. So how does, getting back to the creative side of things here, how does dance fit into this world of yours as a creative outlet for everything that we just talked about? How do you use that beautiful art form as a release, or what is that for you?
It's a little bit of both. It's a little bit of a release, and it's also a little bit of it's kind of like a biography, but it's dancing. It's being able to tell my story and to tell my truth through an art form that I love. Dancing for me has always been the safest place. When I'm angry and I'm upset, anything, that's what I go to, is I go to dance. But all the things that are happening and that have happened to me definitely allow me to be more creative and allow me to be able to tell a bigger story that's not only about me. It's about all the other little Black boys that I see. It's about all the other little Black girls that I see. To me, all of those experiences as a Black artist are important.
Right.
They're vital. They're essential. You have to have them. Because the world's not going to see you.
Right.
And you have to make it see you.
Yeah. And so there's something really special about you, Quan, that I've noticed from just your Facebook, and that is that you take professional development very seriously, and the continuing development of not only your personal dance skills, but also your teaching skills as well. Can you talk to us about why that is so important for you?
I didn't have that. I didn't have that support when I was younger from teachers. There were a lot of teachers that told me that I'd never make it, that I would never graduate, I would never go to college. I'm not a math whiz. Math is my worst subject. I hate numbers.
Same here.
It's not my thing. And I remember having a math teacher in high school that told me, you know what? I'm just going to stop helping you because you don't understand it.
Wow.
And so it was up to my mom, because she's a math whiz, to figure out how to get me to understand math a little bit better. And honestly, to be truthful, I almost didn't graduate because I couldn't pass my math class. And I think that it just, when she told me that I couldn't do it, it made me want to do it even more. And so I made sure that I went on and got, my bachelor's degree.
Your 2 master's degrees.
My 2 master's degrees.
Brag on yourself a little bit.
Yeah, no, brag on myself a little bit. And I also, we recently, we're wrapping up right now. It's got 15 days before it's reviewed. But we started working on a new course for dance appreciation. So hopefully, fingers crossed, it's approved in 15 days, and it's going to be available in the entire state of Texas. And it's going to be able to encompass African American, Mexican American, and Asian American dance. That's awesome. So for all our kids that Houston, Texas, San Antonio, all those kids will be able to see people that look like them in the history of dance.
So important. Quan, I want to thank you for all the honesty that you've shared with us and the truths that you shared with us today. I have one last question here to wrap us up, and that is, from all of your life experiences that you have lived and the students that you interact with on a daily basis, what's your hope for the future for your industry and for the dance industry?
My hope for the dance industry is that we get more people that look like me. But I'm not really an industry person right now, so for me it's education. So in education, my hope is that we get more black male teachers so that our black male dancers can see that this is possible. Yeah. That all the dreams that they have, all the things that they want are within their reach. All they got to do is work for it.
Love that answer. Quan, thank you so much for the talents you shared, not only within our city. We're so lucky to have you. Sorry, Austin and Nacogdoches, but we're so lucky to have you here. But also all the great work that you do in your classroom and with the students at Dallas ISD. I know from a DSM perspective, we appreciate it so much when we get to work with you and your students, and awesome. They're just so lucky to have you in that classroom. Thank you for all that you do. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.